With 3 times the protein of a regular potato, this vine tuber saved the Pilgrims from starving to death. But today, you cannot find it in any grocery store in America. We have been sold a dangerous lie about the food we eat. We rely on weak, fragile crops that require massive machines, chemical fertilizers, and perfect weather just to survive. But hiding in the tangled woods of North America is a biological powerhouse. It is a potato that grows on a climbing vine, engineered by nature to deliver massive calories and protein with no human help. It fueled Native American empires and kept early settlers alive during brutal, freezing winters. So why did the modern farming industry erase it from our plates? Because this unstoppable plant refuses to obey the rules of the tractor. Are you ready to dig up the lost harvest they didn't want you to find? Every acre of potato in America is chained to a chemical lifeline. Industrial fields are force-fed up to 250 kilograms of synthetic nitrogen per hectare each season, bags of urea and ammonium nitrate dumped by the ton to keep these fragile clones alive. The soil beneath is no longer soil at all, but a substrate for chemical reactions. Without this artificial payload, the entire system collapses. The numbers are obscene. 20 separate fungicide applications per season, sometimes more, just to keep blight from devouring the crop before harvest. Chlorothalonil, mancozeb, and azoxystrobin cycle through the sprayers in relentless rotation. Each pass is a desperate move to stay one step ahead of a fungus that never sleeps. This is not farming, this is chemical triage. Potato monocultures are weak by design, bred for uniformity, not resilience. Their shallow roots and thin skins invite every pest, every blight, every failure. They are glass houses propped up by a constant drip feed of synthetic rescue. Each year, the input bill rises, more nitrogen, more sprays, more hours on the tractor. The promise of abundance is a mirage. One bad season, one missed spray, and the whole field rots where it stands. We traded biological superiority for mechanical convenience. We traded a fortress for a glass house. The industrial field is a monument to fragility, engineered for speed, not survival. Meanwhile, the real survival machine waits at the edge of the woods, untouched by the chemical storm, building strength in silence. The tractor draws the blueprint for everything it touches. Modern agriculture did not select its crops for nutrition, resilience, or survival. It selected for what could be planted, sprayed, and ripped from the earth by machine, fast, uniform, and obedient to steel. Row spacing is law, 30 inches, no exceptions. If a plant strays, if its roots wander, or its vines climb, it is disqualified. The field is not a living system, but a grid, designed for the efficient amortization of hardware. Every acre is a spreadsheet, every seed a line item on a single-season finance model. The yield must be immediate. The harvest must be annual. Any crop that dares to operate on a multi-year cycle, any plant that builds strength in silence, out of sync with the fiscal year, is exiled. Hopniss, the so-called groundnut, never stood a chance in this regime. Its string of pearls tuber chain ignores the boundaries of the row. Its vines climb, tangle, and defy the straight lines of a combine. It takes 2 years to build a foundation this strong. The industry can't wait that long, but a survivor can. The payback logic of industrial agriculture demands instant results. Plant in spring, harvest in fall, cash in before the snow flies. There is no patience for infrastructure that outlasts the long term. No room for a calorie factory that fixes its own nitrogen and returns for a second season, stronger than before. We traded biological superiority for mechanical convenience. We traded a fortress for a glass house. The tractor does not reward resilience, it rewards compliance. In the quest for speed, the industry locked itself into a system that cannot tolerate any plant that refuses to conform to the tyranny of the row. In the hands of native cultivators, Hopniss was never left to chance. This was not a wild root stumbled upon in desperation. It was a system, engineered and maintained for centuries. Along the floodplains and forest edges, Indigenous growers laid out polycultures with the precision of a master builder. Corn formed the scaffolding, squash shaded the soil, and Hopniss, the defiant vine, wound its way through the lattice, fixing nitrogen and anchoring the whole structure. The Shawnee, among others, designed these living grids, the so-called Three Sisters, upgraded with a fourth. Where modern agriculture demands a grid of iron and diesel, these growers used biology itself as infrastructure. The groundnuts vines climbed living corn stalk trellises, feeding the squash below with atmospheric nitrogen, and in return, the corn sheltered the vines from wind and sunburn. Harvest was no mere foraging. Skilled hands dug for the string of pearls beneath the soil, tracing the chain from vine to tuber, sometimes yards away from the original stalk. The tubers came up in clusters, some the size of walnuts, some as big as a fist. In summer, the work was communal, a deliberate turning of the soil that spread and multiplied the crop for future seasons. Nothing was wasted. Tubers were boiled, roasted, or sliced and dried on cedar bark scaffolds for winter. Some were simmered in maple syrup, transformed into dense, sweet preserves that could outlast the coldest months. Storage was not an afterthought, it was a survival protocol, as rigorous as any modern supply chain. This was stewardship by design, not accident. Every dig, every transplant, every drying rack was a calculated investment in resilience. Hopniss did not just survive neglect, it thrived on human partnership, returning higher yields with each passing year. The result was a perennial, self-fertilizing calorie factory woven into the land by people who understood that true abundance comes from working with, not against, the living architecture of the earth. Henry David Thoreau arrives at the edge of Walden Pond with a spade in his hand and the chill of New England autumn in the air. He is not searching for comfort. He is searching for infrastructure, calories engineered by nature, not by man. In 1854, Thoreau wrote in Walden that the potato bean Apios tuberosa is a favorite with me. It is a handsome vine with fragrant flowers. The tubers are excellent eating, either raw or cooked. He dug them from the mud, chain after chain, the so-called string of pearls, and found in them the taste of wild American earth, dense, nutty, alive with the memory of survival. Thoreau did not stumble upon Apios as a curiosity. He recognized it as a system built for adversity. In his journals, he described the groundnut as a food that the Indian knew well what he was about when he made this his bread. He understood what modern agriculture refuses to admit. Resilience is not a flaw to be bred out, but a feature to be cultivated. The 2-year investment before maximum yield is not wasted time. It is the price of a fortress. Thoreau's praise is not nostalgia. It is technical validation from a mind that measured every calorie and every risk. He called groundnut the true taste of the American earth. This is not a footnote in botanical history. It is a primary source audit from a man who built his own supply chain, who dug his own calories from the mud. When Thoreau writes that groundnut tubers are far better than potato, sweet, and nutty, he is not just describing flavor. He is describing a survival protocol, a perennial, self-fertilizing calorie factory that can outlast any monoculture, any tractor, any spreadsheet. The testimony of Walden is a standing challenge to the industrial field: build something stronger or be replaced by what endures. Beneath the leaf litter and tangled vines, Hopniss builds its fortress in silence. This is not a loose scatter of tubers, but a deliberate architecture, a string of pearls, each tuber linked along a single root. The chain can run a yard or more, every node a dense payload of calories, every link a living reserve for the next season's assault on hunger. No random sprawl here. This is engineered redundancy, a survival grid mapped below the frost line. But the real genius is invisible to the naked eye. Along the roots, swollen nodules, small blunt beads, pulse with life. Inside, armies of rhizobia bacteria are at work, cracking atmospheric nitrogen and feeding it straight to the plant. Where a potato field guzzles 200 kilograms of synthetic nitrogen per hectare, Hopniss generates its own 50 to 150 kilograms per hectare every year with no outside input. The nodules act as living reactors, cycling nitrogen from air to protein, building strength not just for the vine, but for every plant nearby. Corn, squash, and wild grasses all draw benefit from the surplus, as the groundnut quietly upgrades the soil's infrastructure for free. This is what industrial monoculture cannot tolerate: a plant that refuses to beg for fertilizer, that turns air into yield and leaves the earth richer than it found it. The perennial cycle is not a flaw, it is the price of building a system that endures. 2 years to full strength, yes, but then the machine runs itself, year after year, immune to the input bill, immune to collapse. In the hands of a biological engineer, Hopniss is not just a food source. It is a self-fertilizing calorie factory, a grid-independent survival engine tuned for adversity. The string of pearls is more than a metaphor. It is the blueprint for a food system designed to outlast the storm. The numbers are not a rumor. In the laboratory, Hopniss is put to the test. Dumas combustion and Kjeldahl nitrogen assays. These are not marketing slogans, but the gold standard for protein measurement. The results are blunt. Hopniss tubers clock in at 13 to 17% protein by dry weight. A russet potato, the so-called king of the American starch empire, barely scrapes 2 to 3%. On a fresh weight basis, that is 3 times the protein, payload dense enough to rebuild muscle, repair tissue, and keep a freezing body alive when the world turns white and the larder is empty. Lysine, the amino acid that cereals and potatoes lack, is abundant here. This is not a garnish. This is infrastructure. But numbers alone do not feed a survivor. The real proof is in the eating. In the kitchen, a chain of tubers, mud still clinging to their skins, are washed, sliced, and dropped into a rolling boil. The aroma is earthy, nutty, almost sweet. The texture, once cooked, lands somewhere between a new potato and a chestnut, dense, starchy, with a subtle hint of pea. Roasted, the surface crisps and the interior turns creamy, rich, the kind of food that sticks to the ribs and staves off hunger for hours. Thoreau described groundnuts as excellent eating, either raw or cooked. He dug them from the banks of Walden Pond, savoring what he called the true taste of the American earth. This is not nostalgia, it is technical validation from a mind obsessed with survival engineering. For centuries, native cooks simmered these tubers in maple syrup, dried them into flour, or roasted them in the ashes. The result was always the same: dense, shelf-stable calories, ready for winter. But a warning is stamped on every legume. For those with allergies to peanuts or soy, Hopniss is kin. Consult a physician before testing its resilience in your own system. The rest find a food that is not just edible, but desirable. The data is edible, the flavor is proof. And the numbers, for once, do not lie. Industrial agriculture is allergic to anything it can't dominate with steel. The combine is the law, and any plant that refuses to line up, shut up, and ripen on schedule is thrown out of the system. Hopniss, with its climbing vines and wandering roots, is the ultimate act of defiance. Try to run a tractor through a field of groundnut, and you will get a lesson in chaos theory. Vines snarl axles, tubers scatter like buried treasure, and the so-called string of pearls laughs at every attempt to force it into the neat rows of a spreadsheet. The LSU breeding program proved the numbers. Elite lines can deliver 10 to 12 metric tons per hectare, on par with potatoes, sometimes better. But the real cost is not in the yield, it is in the infrastructure. Trellises are mandatory, $2,000 to $5,000 per hectare, just to keep the vines from eating your equipment alive. The harvest is a surgical operation, not a blitzkrieg. Machines designed for potatoes choke on the tangle. Conveyor belts jam, diggers snap, and the very architecture of the plant, distributed, perennial, untamable, turns every acre into a mechanical minefield. Industrial logic demands instant payback: plant, spray, harvest, cash out. Hopniss says no. It takes 2 years to build a foundation this strong. The industry can't wait that long, but a survivor can. The LSU project ground to a halt, not because the plant failed, but because the machines did. The economists ran the numbers and walked away. The system refused to adapt. We traded biological superiority for mechanical convenience. We traded a fortress for a glass house. But for anyone willing to bypass the machinery to build real infrastructure instead of spreadsheets, the yield is waiting, dense, protein-rich, and immune to collapse. A survivor does not wait for industry approval. The protocol for reclaiming Hopniss begins with a single tuber, one node from the string of pearls, rescued from obscurity by a handful of niche suppliers. This is not a seed packet from a glossy catalog. This is a living fragment of infrastructure, ready to be multiplied. The instructions are blunt. Plant the tuber in loose, well-drained soil, 12 to 18 inches apart, and anchor a trellis or fence at least 6 feet high. The vine will climb, searching for sunlight, and the root will begin its slow, subterranean engineering. Year 1 is pure investment. The chain forms beneath the surface, each tuber linked to the next, building reserves for the coming assault on hunger. The impatient will dig too soon and find only scattered pearls, small and half-formed. The survivor waits. Year 2 delivers the payload, a chain of tubers, each one dense with protein, each one a living reserve. 7 pounds per plant is not a rumor, it is the observed yield in established beds. To guarantee a harvest every season, stagger your plantings. Start a new bed each spring, so that after the second year, a mature chain comes up every fall. This is not a one-time crop. This is infrastructure. Once established, the system runs on autopilot, no fertilizer, no tractor, no chemical rescue. Nitrogen flows from the root nodules into the soil, feeding not just the vine, but every plant in the vicinity. The yield is not a gift, it is a dividend paid to those who invest in patience. The supply chain is thin. Only a handful of companies in North America offer true Apios tubers for propagation, and elite lines from the LSU breeding program are rare finds. But the protocol is open source. Every tuber dug and replanted is a step toward grid independence. The industry cannot wait 2 years for a return. The survivor can. The fortress is waiting to be rebuilt, one chain at a time. We traded biological superiority for mechanical convenience. We traded a fortress for a glass house. Hopniss, 3 times the protein, engineered for harsh winters, self-fertilizing, was built for survival, not speed. It takes 2 years to build a foundation this strong. The industry can't wait that long. But a survivor can. Thoreau knew it. The wild American earth still knows it. The glass house is already cracking.